Hello, it's February 24th, 2022, and this is the Backdrop weekly developer call. We get together every week to talk about priorities and things that are happening in the world of Backdrop, specifically core, but also some peripheral projects. My name is Nate Lampton. I'm Quick Sketch on the internet, and I am coming from Oakland, California. We'll do some other introductions of everyone on the call. We'll start with Joseph, and then we'll go to Robert.
Hi, I'm Joseph. I'm a backend developer from Las Vegas, Nevada.
I'm Robert Lang, bug folder on the internet, coming to you from Altadena, California.
Robert, Greg, and then Savashri, if you're available. Otherwise, we'll go to Jen.
Hi, my name is Greg. I'm joining from Greece, and I'm generally interested in anything related to Backdrop in any way that I can help.
Greg.
I'm Savashri. I'm in Walnut Cove, and I'm just visiting. See what goes on in these meetings.
Thanks, Savashri. We'll go to Jen and then Justin.
Jen Lampton, joining from Oakland, California, and I'm really excited about the changes to the backdropcms.org homepage.
You'll have to tell us about those. Justin, and then finally John.
I'm Justin Christopherson. I'm in Denver, Colorado, and just help out with the infrastructure when I can.
Hi, I'm John Romani. I've been working with Backdrop since 2015, and I'm at the University of California, Irvine.
All right, thanks, John. And thanks, everyone. Let's see. So, I was not here last week, so we'll probably be doing a little bit of a rehash of some of the topics last week. Before we get into Backdrop Core, we usually do a little update on the world of the Contrib community. Jen, you've compiled the list. Could you run through them for us?
Sure. So I don't know how I missed all of the modules that came out last week, but I wanted to mention them today because we've had a huge flurry of activity, which is very exciting. So last week we had views, photo grid, pack and upload, title length, active tags, advanced text formatter, and IP anonymize. And I think I only mentioned IP anonymize in the meeting, and I'm not sure why I missed all of the other modules that were released last week. It was fantastic. So thank you to all of our Contrib developers who are continuing to stay busy on that. This week we had 3 additional ones: token embed views, menu expanded, and node convert. So lots of activity happening in Contrib, which is great.
Yeah, excellent. I've also been seeing all those come in. Also, before we carry on too much, can you talk about the homepage changes?
Sure. So this was revealed in the design meeting in the last hour, but we did get Nika Lorber to do a minor update to the design for the homepage for backdropcms.org, and those should be rolling out before Backdrop Live.
Great. All right, let's see. So every week we have a post that is created on forum.backdropcms.org for soliciting topics for us to cover during these weekly meetings. There were 2 posts this week, one from Indigo Zella and one from Doc Wilmot. Doc Wilmot's is in regard to development of backdropcms.org and just the way that we handle webhooks coming from GitHub, and then the way that we respond to them on backdropcms.org. And he's looking for advice on how we can debug the webhooks that come into backdropcms.org and process them in a way that people can develop like local copies of backdropcms.org that make adjustments to the code there. That includes things like the packager, that when a new release is created in Contrib, it sends a webhook request over to backdropcms.org. Backdropcms.org runs the packager, creates a zip file, updates the info file, and then publishes or uploads the release back to GitHub. I think that's the primary webhook that we have in place. And there's two suggestions that Doc Wellman has put forward. One is that we have a dev site that receives the same webhooks as the real site, I'm guessing that not only would we need to have a dev site, but we need to give people access to the dev site so that they can make changes to the dev site and test things. Yeah, I think as far as development is concerned, that might be a little bit tricky because usually when doing development, you have to make a lot of changes, and if we have the dev site, we would need to have it like be uh, reserved for an individual to like literally modify files directly on the server, or you'd end up with like a really busy Git log of like, fixed the thing 2, fixed the thing 3, where you're just like pushing and then pulling every change there.
But
It's not a bad idea
we already have
anyway, though, to have a dev site. Yeah. Go ahead, Jen.
we already have a beta site. Thanks to Justin, it went up last week or the week before. And it's currently running on a beta branch. And I think we could give people access to merge changes into the beta branch and deploy them there more freely. And then once we're happy with stuff, we could just do a pull request against the live site and pull it in, and that would clean up some of that noise.
Yeah. And the other suggestion, oh, go ahead, Greg.
So the trigger for this was trying to troubleshoot some issues with the packager. And my understanding is that if people want to test it on their local, they would need to have a triggering point, as in, can we instruct the packager to listen to our own repository? So when we fork contrib modules, we create releases there, so we don't affect the actual contrib, and then our local copy listens to our version of the contrib module, and then of course we'll have to test the actual thing, but in the preliminary stages of troubleshooting, are these hard-coded, or can we specify the endpoint? Or
they are hard-coded by the configuration of the webhook in GitHub. It points at a particular URL, and we have that set up to point at backdropcms.org. So we can point GitHub at whatever URL we want, but right now there's only one. I think we could probably set up a second one if we so wanted to. But yeah, in order to receive them from GitHub, there needs to be a public address that GitHub would actually send them to.
Sorry, go ahead, Robert.
There was another alternative that Dr. Wilmot suggested, which was this service called ngrok, in which basically you set that up, and there looks like there's a free low duty cycle version of it, where GitHub would ping ngrok, and then ngrok can mirror that out to your local dev site. So one or more individuals could receive the webhook pings on their local system, and then do all their development there and try things out. And so that was another alternative, and it sort of would avoid the problem or the issue of, when doing a lot of development, doing a lot of pushes to the beta site, which is presumably also people doing Civi CRM development are also tinkering with that site, and might not appreciate it going white screen because a DPM call got left in or something like that. So I just wanted to raise that, kind of channeling my inner Doc Wilmot, as another alternative.
Yeah, this looks like an interesting service. It's N, the letter N is in Nate, Grok, grok.com. And it looks like it's some kind of thing where they're a public service, so we would point at this like backdrop.ngrok.com, for example, as a recipient of the webhook, and then you would run a local process that is connected to the online service, and then it would forward the requests from the public URL to your local computer, making it so that you don't need to have your IP address or a domain name pointed publicly. Instead, this website is the public thing, but then it forwards the requests to you. Yeah, it's a pretty clever looking thing that might be useful in any case. They do have a free tier that I don't think we have a lot of developers working on Backdrop at any given time, or backdropcms.org. We might be able to make do with just that, the lowest level tier, put that into our 1Password for the DevOps group, the people that are members of that. And if I'm not sure if Doc Wellman is a member of that group, but if he is not, then we can get him added to that. Then we could work that way. Yeah, it's a good option. Personally, I'll say what I've done in the past for backdropcms.org packager problems is GitHub itself has a history of every webhook request that it sends, and then a record of the responses. And so usually what I've done for my local development is I create a test package in Contrib, and then I go over to GitHub webhook log, and then I just take the JSON from the webhook example and I copy it into a clipboard, and then I curl my own local computer with the logged version of the JSON. And that way I only need to create one package, and then I just execute the curl command repeatedly to hit my local to test creating the package. That way I'm not creating a package to make the web request happen every time. Instead, I just use the log to recreate the web request. And that has its own advantages in a way that you don't need to actually manually initiate the webhook in order to receive it. I mean, you have to do it once, but then after that, you're just like simulating the webhook happening on your computer. So that's something that we can do right now. I don't think that the WebGrok, ngrok, I think that's a good idea anyway. But I don't think it needs to be a barrier really for development. I think we probably need to either get a log to Doc Wellman if he's working on these things, or if it's possible, we might just also just give Doc Wilmot that level of permission to see the weblog history directly. I think that's probably the problem, is that he doesn't have the access to see that thing right now.
And
Yeah.
I have two questions. So no questions. The one is a request. It seems, Nate, that you have done this before. So if you could document, like even bullet points, the process, then maybe we could do it, and this would be a valuable resource. And the other thing is that the method that you described still requires you to create a package in our actual official contrib group, right?
Yeah, it does. I mean, well, in a way, creating a release on our contrib group is no different from creating a release on any GitHub project anywhere. It's the same content that will be sent. So really, you don't even need to make a Backdrop contrib project. You can just make a release anywhere you want in your own personal repository, and it will be the same thing as far as the webhook contents is concerned.
Okay. Justin was waving. He wasn't raising. I thought that Justin was raising his hand, but he was waving goodbye. Yeah.
Yeah, but you're right, Greg. Documentation would help tremendously, I think, with debugging this.
Yeah.
I think didn't you document this somewhere before when we were working on the GitHub integration? I feel like it's probably in an issue somewhere.
It's probably exactly where it is in an issue.
We could
And
probably go.
I remember this vaguely too, but I can't remember where I put that one.
I think it was when Jeff was working on the GitHub integration from backdropcms.org. It's a while ago.
Yeah, we should put the documentation in the backdropcms.org repository, though.
Yeah,
somewhere. That's
where it belongs. Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. We have more topics to discuss, so we'll kind of move on from that. Indigozella raised two questions around access functions. There's issue 5480, which is around file access, and then issue 5517, which is around just general entity access functions across all entity types. So in both cases, we have these functions. In the case of files, there's file underscore access. In the case of nodes, there's like node underscore access, taxonomy term access, etc. And the file access one, there's a pull request that she's been working on that makes it so that file access behaves more like the other types of entities, and in particular starts dealing with view access, I believe. Hang on, let me take a look. View and download access. And I'm sure that IndigoZL is looking for more specific feedback than me just mentioning this issue, but as I haven't reviewed this pull request yet, I'm not sure I can provide a lot of valuable feedback. Does anyone else have any familiarity with this topic, or have something that I could go off of as far as providing feedback? Yeah.
No, I think that the IndigoZella and RG Piano were working on these, but the level, the depth of knowledge into entity space required did not at least allow me personally to contribute, other than saying that I would make sure that these are brought up in the dev meetings. I think that both IndigoZella and RG Piano are basically waiting for core committers for direction and feedback.
Okay. Yeah. And then the other issue, 5517, is pretty similar in that regard, that it's deeply, actually this one isn't quite so bad, but both of these are very technical questions about like what should we possibly do for these things. I do think that IndigoZL is asking this thing as one of the alternatives would be to create new methods in all core entity classes to check access, which would make a lot of sense. But yeah, there's a lot of methods, and I think generally IndigoZella is raising this concern around like the entity system in Backdrop is not fully fleshed out, that there's a lot of holes in its functionality, and that we should work to build out the capabilities of the entity system to be more comprehensive, and in particular to make it so that Entity Plus is not really a dependency for so many modules. And so I think we're already working towards that. I mean, I say we're working towards that as a community. In particular, really is IndigoZella and RG Piano like really pushing forward on improving the entity system substantially. And Robert, you too. I think you've been in there.
No,
So yeah,
just a little bit.
just a little bit. So I appreciate all of the efforts there, and I think it's a worthy cause, and I think that yeah, I'll continue to try to provide the support that I can, but
Yeah, there's
yeah, I'll
also
try to get to
a
work
lot of
reviewing these issues.
Yeah, my understanding is that there's also a lot of inconsistencies between the functions that we already have. So it's a developer experience issue, and also certain things not working as they were meant to. So yeah.
Yeah, the case of file access, we need to do some fixes there because the file system has a lot more capabilities in Backdrop than it did in Drupal 7, and so we need to start taking into account the fact that files are now entities that are fieldable, that have pages now. Like all of the functionality of media module in Drupal 7, we effectively have incorporated a lot of that into Backdrop Core, and some of the things like file access functions haven't really caught up with that. Yeah. All right. Let's see. I wanted to do the status report update. We have one more topic about the Drupal end of life announcement that came out yesterday, but I think that'll probably fill up the remainder of the meeting. So before we get into that, I'll do a quick update on releases. We came out with Backdrop 121.2 on February 9th. That includes 22 closed issues, which is a great release for us. It was also a security release. We had a corresponding Drupal issue that we had to make a release for at the same time. But it was really fantastic to get out all of those fixes. We've been really active as far as like cleaning up a lot of small issues in core. In regards to that, Backdrop 121.3, the next bug fix release, there are currently 30 open issues in that milestone, 3 of which are RTBC, and almost all of which have pull requests, and most of them are in a state of needs review. So we're in a really excellent spot here as far as getting some more fixes into the next bug fix release of Backdrop. I'm really happy about the amount of activity that we've been having to continue cleaning things up. As usual, we get kind of stuck on the review process on these things. So if there's any reviewers out there that are interested in taking a look, the 121.3 milestone has a lot of issues that could use some eyeballs on it. Okay. Finally, so yeah, yesterday there was an announcement from the Drupal community that Drupal 7 currently runs about 50% of all Drupal websites out there still, despite Drupal 8 having been out for, how long has it been? Seven years?
7.
Drupal 8 has already had its entire run of its life and is now no longer supported, and now Drupal 9 is out. But even then, these Drupal 7 sites keep chugging along. And so it had been scheduled that Drupal would have its end of life later this year. Drupal 7 would have its end of life, but the announcement, I believe, encompassed a change in policy that says that Drupal's end of life is now indefinite. They haven't really specified when Drupal 7 will officially cease being supported, but for the foreseeable future, it will maintain the status quo of being a community supported project that new releases will come out on Drupal.org, and security updates will continue to be covered well past this year, 2022. We just don't, I think they're waiting to actually see the data as to like whether or not these large number of Drupal sites will ever drop off and when they'll stop supporting Drupal 7. The way that this affects us is that we had set our end of life dates for Backdrop 1 based on the end of life of Drupal 7. So with Drupal 7 having an end of life in 2022, our plan had been to have Backdrop 1 run its course and come out sometime in, or Backdrop 2 would probably come out like in 2024. So 2 years after.
25,
excuse me. But now that's not really clear. Like, you know, now there is no end of life of Drupal 7 and how long we should be pursuing getting like continue being like the lifeboat for Drupal 7 users. You know, like it's not quite as urgent as it might have been before yesterday, because now all of the Drupal 7 users might feel that there's not really a need to move on for the time being.
We could also be a little bit smarter about our upgrade path too, knowing that we're in this scenario where like if we want to release Backdrop 2, we could have a backwards compatibility layer, much like our Drupal.inc file, that could be like a Backdrop 1 that could contain all of the update functions that we would normally remove from Backdrop when new version came out. And then that way people could opt to turn that on if they wanted to come from Drupal 7 to go through Backdrop 2. So we could try and figure out a way to manage the updates, knowing that people could still be coming from Drupal 7 even after Backdrop 2 is out.
Yeah, and we never clarified that even if Backdrop 2 were to come out, you know, 3 years from now, if it would still include an upgrade path from Drupal 7 or not. I don't think we ever really said that it wouldn't. The idea of Backdrop 2 primarily isn't really around new features. It's about cleaning up the cruft that we've acquired, removing all of the deprecated functionality. And we have a lot of functionality within Backdrop itself that like we have a lot of deprecated things that we introduced and then deprecated ourselves. So we can actually remove a fair amount of deprecated functionality without affecting in any way the users that are coming from Drupal 7. We do have a lot of deprecated stuff from Drupal 7 that we're carrying around as well. But if we left those things in place to ease the transition from Drupal 7, Backdrop 2 could provide us an opportunity to clean up our code base from deprecated functionality within our own code, but not actually affects the users coming from Drupal 7.
We could also just move that code to another like Drupal.inc file so that if you didn't need the compatibility for Drupal 7, it wouldn't be there. And if you did, you could turn it on.
Oh, I see.
The deprecated stuff.
Yeah, interesting, because right now the Drupal wrappers are all in a Drupal.inc file.
Yeah.
And we could start introducing multiple of these kind of like deprecated functionality wrappers. Yeah, it doesn't work for everything, but you're right that would be one approach we could use to kind of wean
some of
people
it.
off of these things. Also, we have the Drupal deprecation file being included by default in Backdrop 1. It might also be reasonable for us to
Turn it off.
turn it off in Backdrop 2. Again, it doesn't really affect users coming from Drupal 7. It affects the porting of modules from Drupal 7. And really, like, using any Drupal namespace function like Drupal set message being a really typical one. It's now backdrop set message. Hopefully most of those changes have already occurred over the last 7 or 8 years that the backdrop has already been out. And I think maybe moving, and those aren't really the most challenging changes to make in the backdrop code base either. Like, it's a simple find and replace is all that include file is really providing for us.
One thing that I would like to point out is that the dates that have been specified by the Drupal community are with regards to Drupal 7 core. A lot of Drupal 7 contrib maintainers stated that they will set their 7.x branches as unsupported. So it doesn't mean that Drupal 7 site owners are off the hook. It wasn't clarified whether they're going to be security fixes for these branches or that the contrib maintainers will care for those. So we might be discussing now with Drupal 7 core in mind that it will keep receiving security updates, but site owners might be forced to seek a solution sooner because of contrib push.
Yeah, and that's a really there's a poignant example of that Colorbox module and several other very popular modules were marked unsupported a couple weeks ago in the Drupal 7 space. And we as the backdrop community have ports of these modules that are supported. But I know Jen in particular had to go through like several hoops to try to get access to the security issues that were reported to Drupal so that she could then fix them for the backdrop versions. But as a part of that, she actually ended up becoming maintainers for the Drupal 7 versions of these modules. But yeah, that's a really great example of like the same code that is available for Drupal 7 may end up getting marked unsupported kind of permanently because there's no effort in maintaining it, while the backdrop port of that same module will continue to be supported and maintained. And so it's a really good example of like why it would be a good idea for a lot of owners to get their sites off of Drupal 7 and into backdrop if they're looking at it, if they're looking for an easier transition.
And also there's the point of people have been holding on to off with finding a solution in order to see what's going to happen in that space, but all Drupal 7 owners have not been getting any value out of their sites. Whereas if you move to Backdrop, you get new features every 4 months and so on, and better support. So there's business case for that. So we need to be aware of that. So in other words, what I'm trying to say is that yes, the announcement yesterday is good news in a sense, as it gives some breathing room when it comes to the main product and security coverage. But the urgency of finding a solution may not be, waived completely. So that should be taken into account when we consider what we do with Backdrop 2.0.
Yeah, it does give us an opportunity if we so wanted. Like if we change what Backdrop 2 is, we could release Backdrop 2 sooner than we had previously planned if we so wanted to, as long as because it's like if Backdrop 2 keeps its current definition of being as, including everything that we have right now, carrying all of this baggage to make coming over from 777 as easy as possible. But we continue to tie it to 777. Like, we don't really know when Backdrop 2 would come out. It could end up being like 2030 or something crazy like that, And for that reason, we may want to change our plan around what Backdrop 2 is, because it's not just tied to the end of life of 777 anymore. That doesn't mean that we necessarily need to move the date, but it does mean that we need to change the approach that we have for what Backdrop 2 actually means. Yeah, but now it's not really tied to the date either, because there's no trigger point for 777 end of life. So is our date, does it need to be tied to the previous date that doesn't have any meaning anymore?
Do you see the updates in the PHP world as something that might drive your Backdrop 2.0 release?
Point.
Yeah, it's a good question too. This again, it kind of comes down to like, how serious we are about our backwards compatibility commitment. Right now, we're kind of extreme about it, honestly. We just merged these changes that actually we haven't merged them yet, but we're increasing the minimum PHP version to PHP 5.6 for Backdrop 1.22. But PHP 5.6 is not supported by the PHP community, nor is I think PHP 7.4 is barely supported at this point, but it's the last version of PHP 7 that's still supported by PHP itself.
I think they're dropping security support for 7.4 in November.
Yeah, they still have the same issue though, where operating system vendors continue to backport stuff from the newer versions of PHP, so the lifetime is actually a little bit longer than it is of PHP's official support. The OS vendors continue to make the life of that a little bit longer.
One good thing is that we have telemetry now.
Yeah, to see what sites are, what versions are actually running. Yeah, but John, you're right that there's definitely been a fundamental shift in the way that PHP proceeds with its releases, that they're a lot faster now than they used to be during the cycle of PHP 5 and even PHP. I don't know, PHP 7 had a lot of releases, but I don't really know if things have slowed down or not. But PHP 7 and 8, they're definitely moving a lot faster than they did during the PHP 4 and 5 cycles.
I've seen two things. One is when I move to new hosting, that the platform is coming with PHP 7.4, and certainly it's going to be 8.0 pretty soon. And that is requiring me to update a lot of modules to deal with PHP syntax changes. The other thing is, as someone who has Drupal 6 sites that I still need to upgrade, I'm expecting to upgrade them from Drupal 6 to Drupal 7 and from Drupal 7 to Backdrop 1. And if there's a Backdrop 2, then I would just go from Backdrop 1 to Backdrop 2. I don't see that as a huge burden for someone who's upgrading a pretty old Drupal site, that they might have to make an intermediate step along the way to get up to something that supports modern PHP and has the legacy code removed.
Yeah, that's kind of an interesting thought, that the constantly shifting demands of PHP could actually push people into Backdrop, because Backdrop does have support for the latest versions of PHP, but we have a surprisingly large amount of support for pretty old versions of PHP too, which is a good way to ease people's transitions into Backdrop. They don't need to set up a new server right away to move on to Backdrop, but if they do move to a newer one, and we encourage that, then it supports all the way up to the latest versions of PHP. But we're running into kind of some limitations there, that our PHP 8 support, for example, there's some things that PHP has done that make supporting PHP 9, when that comes out, and PHP versions prior to 7 almost impossible. So that'll be a really challenging situation when we get to that PHP itself is making it more difficult because they're creating really hard breaks in their backwards compatibility between old versions and very new versions. So that'll be a challenge that we also have to face.
Maybe that's what you call it, a milestone that will sort of like demand a if not 2.0, because we have it by then, another major version of Backdrop, because there would be no way to support PHP 7 and 9 at the same time.
Yep,
and
that'll be a really fascinating problem for Drupal 7 in particular, because if it's not possible to literally like support PHP 9 in Drupal 7 without breaking their existing APIs, because that's what this is looking like, is that we need to change our APIs in order to support PHP 9, but also continue to support these old PHP versions. And so it's like we will have to change our code to accommodate PHP 9, it looks like.
Mm-hmm. I'm not sure I want to suggest this because I think it would be a maintenance nightmare, but we could detect the PHP version and load different files based on which version you're on.
Yeah, I think we'll want to avoid that if at all possible.
Yeah. I would expect us to have a different brands if that happens. Yeah.
But it's actually it's unclear if this is really going to be a problem, because even within the PHP community, like I looked at some of the announcements that they made, and it was like a pretty even split between. They have a voting procedure, kind of like we do, only there's a much larger number of people that vote, and I think the vote was somewhere around the scope of like 65 for and like 45 against the proposal of creating these deprecations that would not be backwards compatible in the future. So there was actually a fair amount of opposition to even the proposal that made it so that there would be backwards compatibility breaks in the future. And so, but the current thing that ended up happening was that they proposed a backwards compatibility break, but there was an easy way to circumvent it. And so even that proposal met some opposition. So it's possible that when it comes to actually pulling the trigger and breaking a lot of existing PHP code intentionally, that timeline might get pushed off further than just PHP 9. We don't really know. Sorry, we're getting into things that are like, yeah, pretty vague and ephemeral. But I mean, the Drupal 7 end of life got extended. What does that mean for Backdrop? I don't know. Could be an interesting topic for Backdrop Live, right?
Yeah.
One thing I think we should do with our messaging is to make it clear that Drupal 7 core was extended. I know we've talked about it, but people hear Drupal 7 is extended and they think I don't have to do anything, and their contributed modules that they use in their site are going to be, hitting into life very, very rapidly. So we should make sure our messaging is clear that it's only Drupal core that's been extended. Your urgency is still there to get yourself off this platform.
Yeah, great idea, John. All right. Well, I guess it didn't spur as much conversation as I thought. So we're here at kind of the end of the hour. Does anyone have any other topics or anything they'd like to bring up? No? Okay. Well, we will close then. Another weekly meeting. Thank you all for joining as always. Let's see. I feel like because Tim's not here, we should still probably make an announcement about Backdrop Live. Jen, would you be able to talk about that real briefly?
Sure. So our next Backdrop Live is coming up on March 11th and 12th. If you want to register now, you can. You can sign up on the website. You can leave a recommended donation of any amount. And if you want to have a conversation about something specific, you can take a look at the schedule and see what's already on there, but you're also welcome to propose your own discussion. You can choose whatever time you want, and if there's room on the schedule, it'll show up in that spot, and if there's not room on the schedule, it won't. But we are reviewing the discussions that are submitted, and we'll try and move them around to make sure we have enough space for all of the sessions that people want to have at the time they want to have them.
You can find more information at events.backdropcms.org. Based on registrations that have come in, it looks like this is going to be a pretty exciting event. That starts 2 weeks from tomorrow. Okay, well, thanks again, everybody. We'll see you all on the internet. I'll do my best to try to get some reviews in on some of these things that have been brought up for IndigoZella and others. Yeah, we'll continue working through those bug fixes so that we can get out another release in the near future. So, all right, thanks, everybody.